Welcome back to Sunrise Daily. We turn our attention now to the 21st in the series of the Nigerian Economic Summit. We're joined now by Laoye Jayola, who is the Chief Executive Officer of the NESG, to give us his perspective on this year's events. Thank you for coming on this morning.
Thank you.
Quite a number of things are different. You highlighted some of those in your forward earlier, and you talk about, the theme is tough choices. Give us the background first and foremost. What informs you deviating from what used to be the norm, sectorial focus, and now you're looking at tough choices?
Well, thank you very much. Looking at the entire economy is not the first thing. If you look at the history of the NES, we usually look at the entire economy because it allows the private sector and the civil society to have input into the budget discussions. But in the last three years, predicted now, we decided to look at key issues like foreign investment, agri, and education. And that's why we do those sectoral programs. But this year, you're having the first time in the history of Nigeria where you're going to have a transfer of power from party to party. And then beyond that, we're seeing oil prices plummeting to as low as 40s or 50s, right? And foreign exchange reserves going down. And all the indices are looking south. And then we just believe that we, as a private sector, our engagement with the federal government should look beyond sector. And so what we've tried to do is to look at what are the tough choices that we need to make as a nation. And in looking at those tough choices, we realize that we're not the only nation facing those circumstances. And therefore, foreign capital, whatever it is we're looking for, will not come to Nigeria unless we make ourselves attractive to them. That's why we're looking at the issues of what are the tough choices we do with to make Nigeria attractive and competitive investment. How can we ensure that whatever growth is it we have, because we have growth in terms of GDP growth over the years, is as much inclusive as it should be, because data will show you that nations that have done pro-poor policies have done a lot better. And so how can we make sure that the growth this time around is inclusive? And how do we ensure that we do it at a very sustainable basis? So those are the factors that informed the theme for this year.
I see you also talk about current dynamics on the economic scene that require urgent attention. What might those be?
Very, very, very clear to mind is the fact that you're doing oil at $40 per barrel. Coming from what we're doing over 100, so we don't have enough accretion to reserve, and therefore we're facing instances where states are not having enough money to even deal with their own operations. Beyond that, we're dealing with issues of FX. Demand for FX is not available. Discussions as regard what trade is or the other. The income available to all the governments, they're not enough. There have been issues of subsidy or no subsidy. How do we rein in this extra money that we need? But that's something that is clear. Nigerians need to invest in education, in health, and make ourselves very attractive so that we can grow this economy. We have tons of
Nigerians need to invest.
Yeah, we need to invest ourselves because, again, our belief is that we must show the lead before foreigners can come and join us. We must make ourselves attractive. I tell people, if nations like Kuwait and Saudi Arabia can now be doing things to attract foreign investment, despite all the resources they have, then we need to do tons and tons and tons. But we have the market, we have the potentials. So what do we need to do? And for us, it goes beyond mere economy. That's why you look at our program, we are looking at the issue of institutions. Because we need to look at our institutions to ensure, they foster economy, they foster inflow of funds, they foster doing business. For us, it's about how do you make the environment attractive.
The inclusive philosophy in business is very, very key here. And you have said, you have noticed that over the decade, we haven't actually done that. A couple of times we have come up to talk about so many other businesses that have been left unattended, that hasn't gotten the attention of even the government and those that should even help small businesses. So if you say we should be able to showcase ourselves now, not looking at a particular sector, now we're looking at, we're trying to be octopussy in nature, looking at so many sectors all at the same time. What are those things that you thought on the top of your head that we had ignored in the past decade?
Chairman, it's very, very simple. If you look at when we rebased our economy,
that was last year.
Yeah, a number of people were asking, so, what's been making this economy very strong? Because the data we didn't have enough data to show where it was coming from. We're seeing that, we're strong, we're resilient, but what was making that possible? But when we did the rebasing, it was clear to us that there are sectors that are doing well. I mean, look at this. The informal sector, we're doing a lot of work. The SME is doing a lot of work. So the first thing you need to do is that how do you liberate the energy in these small people? They can employ 6 people, take people out of work. That's one. How do you use construction? How do you use agri? And how do we get away from just a focus on oil and gas? And the fact is that a lot of data exists on what we need to do. But for me, I believe that to make it inclusive, we need to look at the SME sector. And that's why you find out that this year we're looking at that. But beyond that, you need the infrastructure to be in place for them. Because if the cost of business is so high, again, it should not be competitive.
So that's why you're looking at specific areas, achieving competitiveness, inclusive growth, and sustainability. So these are the areas that you're looking at specifically in regards to tough choices. But people always say that conferences are always beautiful. It's always very nice to come for conferences, and the NESG has been consistent in terms of how it's done its own conferences, the style, the delivery. Must be very challenging. Also, I'm sure you've had to make some tough choices in these times as well. Just wondering though, how would you quantify the impact of those conferences on a yearly basis?
To a large extent, we had to ask ourselves that question.
Yeah.
Because a lot of people said, you do this thing, you've done it for 21 years. So how do you measure how impactful it's been? And we didn't want to do by ourselves, so we're commissioned an agency to look at what's been the impact. Sometimes we take the phone for granted. They were part of the discussions that came in here. We talked about the pensions. We take it for granted. They were part of the discussions that came from NESG discussion. Even the agri revolutions you saw were part of the discussions that came from NESG. But the way we find out is that it's not immediately that we discuss those things are taken on. And one of the concerns we have is that those decisions are not taken on. Well, we're not saying that, we are the sole provider of owners of knowledge. But the fact is that let us begin to look at it. And I tell you, beyond the summit, a lot of people think that the summit is just a 3-day program and you go. We have policy commissions that work 24/7. There are 10 policy commissions covering different areas of the economy. And it's supposed to be an interaction between the private sector and the public sector. But what we saw over the years is that the representation of the public sector waned. So rather than have very senior people attend, they started delegating, and they over-delegated. And what that did for the private sector people was that they lost interest. But we had a discussion with the Vice President, and he committed that, look, we're going to do that again. But beyond that, we're trying to make sure, for us to have more teeth, the legislature that have oversight should be part of this meeting so that they can really have a better grasp. There's nothing wrong in the committees of the legislature knowing what we are doing so that we can be involved in. And to make it much more attractive, Mr. Maran, we're trying to even reach out to the governments, state governments, because hey, they have over 50%.
Plenaries for almost all the governors.
That's right.
Regional, is it brainstorming sessions for all of them?
That's right.
And you're hoping that something tangible will come from there that they would be able to implement?
For us, it's the first step. Let's start engaging. Let's start knowing what the challenges are. And we say, look, Nigerians are willing and available to help. So after this conference, we intend to sit with the various state governments, and of course, we're not going to force ourselves on anybody, but as many as are willing, we'll work with them, work with the planning ministry, and make available the expertise that we have in the NESG. The thing is that the NESG itself is a small office, but we have plenty of people that are willing to work for Nigeria, both within and outside. They volunteer at that time, they are not paid, it's a pro bono thing.
Just wondering though, what has been the cooperation? Because you have said that, we were saying that government participation over the year in terms of the level of participation has sort of dwindled. We're hoping that comes back on. But what has been the cooperation that you've seen in recent times with governments, be they at the state or federal level?
No, let me make a correction. That particularly at the policy commission level,
Okay.
At the 3-day summit, they've been fantastic. Our partner in the federal government is national planning. And I must say that the last 21 years they've been available. We do these normal meetings, but we need beyond the National Planning Commission. We need agencies of government. We are dealing with issues of trade, issues of investment, issues of agri that are relevant. MDG must get involved and engage their counterparts in the public sector.